nature-based solutions and how to Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bipartisan Policy Center. I'm Sasha Mackler, and I lead the energy program at the BPC, and we're really excited about the conversation lined up for you all today, focused on the critical ingredients for our future prosperity. The topic of today's conversation is critical minerals, what they are and why they are so important to our nation's security, our economic future, and our ability to navigate the coming energy transition. As domestic energy policy looks to a rapid transition towards lower carbon technologies, we also expect a significant increase in demand for the minerals that go into making these advanced materials. And according to the International Energy Agency, global demand for minerals will increase sixfold by 2050. And lithium demand alone, a key input for batteries, is expected to nearly double just this decade. And right now, the US is currently import dependent on nearly all of these critical minerals. We're also dependent on our trading partners for important processing steps in the supply chain for advanced materials. For example, China has over 75% of the global cell fabrication for advanced batteries, with the US at just 10%. The importance of strong and secure supply chains is well understood in the energy arena, and we've recently been reminded of their significance during the COVID pandemic. Managing these security and economic risks must be a part of our long-term energy agenda. And we have with us today a very special guest and a longtime friend of the BPC, Senator Lisa Murkowski, who is, in my view, a critical member of Congress, as she is a leader in thinking, in collaboration, and in legislation around all things energy. Senator Murkowski needs little introduction to this audience. She's the senior senator from Alaska. She has deep experience on energy and environmental issues, having just concluded her chairmanship of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And her leadership there really demonstrated notable bipartisanship and thoughtfulness on a host of issues, which culminated in a major legislative achievement at the end of last year with the Energy Act of 2020. We thank the senator for her perseverance and congratulate the success on that legislation. She's now the ranking member of the Indian Affairs Committee and a senior appropriator. No surprise, Senator Murkowski has seen around the corner and has been focused on mineral security for more than a decade now. As the issue comes into greater focus today, we will hear about her sense of the challenge and what the policy agenda is. And hopefully we'll also hear a little bit about the status of the infrastructure bill that everyone is paying such close attention to. Once we hear from the senator, we'll try to fit in a few questions before she needs to depart quickly at 3. And then I'll turn things over to my colleague, Julie Anderson, who will introduce our next speakers. Let me remind everyone to please submit questions using the live chat on YouTube or Facebook, or on Twitter using the hashtag BPC Live. And with that, thanks, Senator Murkowski, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Sasha, thank you. And thank you to the BPC for all the work that you do. You're right. This is a very important conversation that is on deck today. And I thank you for the leadership that's going on. You know, when you think about this past year and how much of our lives have shifted to an increasingly digital world. Previous events, you probably would have invited me to participate live and in person. Instead, we're here on Zoom. But whether it's conferences like this, whether it's kids going to school remotely, people working from home, all the screens, all the tablets, all the printers, all the ancillary equipment that we're all utilizing. These are all made possible by critical minerals. And of course, we know it's not just limited to things like your personal devices, your smartphones. These are intertwined with every facet of a technologically advanced economy. Everything from the high-end magnets that make the wind turbines and EVs more efficient, to fiber optics, to super alloys. It is everything that we're doing. So you mentioned in your opening there, what is a critical mineral? The definition was codified in my Energy Act of 2020 as minerals, elements, substances, or materials that are 1, essential to the economic or national security of the United States, 2, the supply chain of which is vulnerable to disruption, And 3, serve an essential function in the manufacturing of a product, the absence of which would have significant consequences for the economic or national security of the United States. So it really does describe how critical, this is why we call them critical minerals here. This list is put together by some pretty great scientists at USGS. They consult with the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, the Department of Commerce. It's updated every couple of years. It really is a snapshot in time of what minerals are vital to our economy and to our national security. And as I mentioned, this list adapts. You mentioned notably the vulnerability that we have. The US is currently import reliant on 31 of the 35 minerals on our critical minerals list. We've got no domestic production. We rely completely on imports to meet our demand for 14 of them. So think about that vulnerable position that really puts us in. This is potentially long-term national security threats to our country. I think we've certainly seen in this past year and a half with COVID, we've seen how vulnerable we are when we face supply chain disruption. So think about what that means in the context of critical minerals, to the significance of our economy, to what it means to our ability to compete in a broader, more global world. And when we speak about what's going on in the global world, we all look to China. China has been a powerhouse on the world stage regarding critical minerals, not only with the supply of minerals, but with the processing and the refining capabilities. Chinese dominance in the EV industry chain has been a decade-long methodical approach through policies to build low-cost domestic production. They use subsidies, preferential policies, trade barriers. But I think what we have seen is China has positioned themselves to achieve vertical integration within the global supply chain. They've cultivated an emerging EV industry that depends on China for the batteries and the battery inputs. So this is where we are. So the real question is what are we going to do about it? What are we doing about it? And I think it is important to say here that I'm pleased that the administration is continuing the work of the previous administration in taking a very keen and critical approach to this. The ambitious targets that this administration has set with regards to EVs and renewable energy technologies, these are going to require our approach on critical minerals to be just as robust as the push is on that. You mentioned my Bipartisan Energy Act of 2020. That, I think, was a critical stepping stone here in terms of what we're doing to help build out our critical minerals and to lessen our vulnerability. What we're doing now with the bipartisan infrastructure bill is yet another part of what comes next in this this strategy. The energy provisions of the bipartisan infrastructure proposal, which passed through the Energy Committee last month, we are focusing on incorporating them into the broader package here. But this is a view towards understanding the domestic mapping of our mineral resources, demonstration projects for rare earth element facilities, battery processing, manufacturing grants, as well as grants for advanced manufacturing and recycling. So I think what we're trying to do here is move these along, jumpstart them, if you will. The bill also incorporates my bill, which aims to improve the timeliness and the effectiveness of the federal permitting and the review process, because we know that when we're talking about production of minerals, if we can't do better as a nation in this area, it's not going to get us very far ahead. It takes an average of 12 years right now to try to permit a mine here in this country. Huge regulatory hurdles that can cause businesses to really pause, hesitate to deploying any initial capital here. So we've got to move out. I think we need to move out aggressively. We need to move out strongly. This administration has taken an approach that is probably more aggressive when it comes to recycling and substitute technologies. Also looking to allied partner nations to secure reliable supply chains, looking to Canada. That's not a bad thing to do. That's not unreasonable to do, but I was a little bit set aback by a recent article in Reuters. This was a couple months ago now, but they suggested that the administration was kind of looking at Canada as the 51st state when it comes to a critical mineral supply chain. Well, coming from the 49th state here, I don't want you to leapfrog over us, because I think that we have some extraordinary potential and want to be able to prove that out. But if we're really going to be serious about addressing the critical mineral security and how to shorten the processing and the refining gaps here in the country, we have to have a rational, clear-headed approach to mineral development and the benefits and increased domestic supply can provide. We've got the resources, we've got the highest labor and environmental standards in the world. I think as a country, we've got to acknowledge the mineral intensity of some of these renewable technologies, including the life cycle of source materials, with a recognition that the current sources for some of these minerals rely on local labor and environmental standards that are not compatible with our values. So as we anticipate, we know that the demand is going to grow exponentially for these minerals, for energy storage, for battery technologies. We've got to be cognizant in order that these technologies be widely adopted and be cost competitive. So we've got a ways to go towards mineral security. We're making steps in the right direction. Whether it's the Energy Act of 2020, which we're very proud of, and we appreciate the good work of so many within BPC to help us with that, or the efforts that we are engaged in currently with the bipartisan energy infrastructure. So we're moving full speed ahead. We're moving with eyes wide open, but the attention and the advocacy on this issue specifically is so appreciated, because I think we recognize that if we're going to be competitive on a global scale, we cannot forget what comes at the base of it all, and these are our minerals. So, Sasha, thanks for the opportunity to give you a few words, and if we've got time for a couple questions here, happy to field them.
Well, that's great. Thank you for those thoughtful remarks and for your leadership on these issues and for the amplification of the priorities here that you just put forward. It was a very thorough sort of overview that you just provided on the substance of the legislation and what's, what are some of the reasons behind the policy agenda that you just put forward. Can you share a little bit, because I know you're in the midst of this right now, what's the political path forward here with the infrastructure bill and how this fits in, and what can we expect to see, coming out of the next few days, because we know this is a critical period right now for that whole package.
It is a critical period. I wish that I could tell you that we have everything buttoned up as of, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, but we don't. We still have a few outstanding issues. I think the good news for this conversation, talking about critical minerals and the significance, is that this is not one of those that is in dispute. Again, I think it's significant that you have an understanding, Republicans, Democrats, rural and urban, that these are important to America's security interests, both energy security and national security. So we're looking forward to being able to advance the power infrastructure piece of this through the broader bill. In terms of where we are right now, there are a few key initiatives that we want to make sure that we have right. We have a really solid group of 10 members, Republicans and Democrats, that have literally been working day and night. Last evening, I was in the midst of negotiations with one of my counterparts on the other side of the aisle. I've been waiting for him to get back with me with my with the offer that I had, and ding, I hear my phone ring and or my text bing, and I go over anxiously thinking, all right, now I've got an answer and I can get ready to go to bed. But no, he was congratulating me on Lydia Jacoby winning the gold in the swimming competition last week. So that was all good high fives. But in fairness, we were on the phone with one another probably for about another hour and a half up until midnight. This is what we've been doing. I think that we have made extraordinary progress. Everything that I see in every meeting that I am in indicates that the White House is very committed to this bipartisan proposal. We were kind of thrown a little bit of a loop Sunday night when we got basically a new proposal that was sent our way from Leader Schumer's office. So it set us back. I'll tell you that, it set us back. But I think the discussions amongst our group of 10 and the broader group of 22 are still strong and underway. And we're not giving up on this because we put too much good into it. I think it's too important from a policy perspective. We need to make investments in our aging infrastructure, but I also think it is critical from the perspective of the institution and whether or not we can demonstrate to the American public that Republicans and Democrats can come together on significant issues, work through their differences, and be able to move legislation that is going to benefit all Americans, urban and rural, Republican and Democrat alike. And I think at this point in time, that is as important as the policy initiative.
Well, thank you, Senator, for those final thoughts and for taking the time to join us today in the midst of what is, I'm sure, a very busy period for you. And thank you for all the work that you're doing on these issues. We all very much appreciate it, and we are rooting for the bill to get across the line. So thanks for your time today.
We thank you for BPC's advocacy on this. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your conversation. Take care.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Julie, who will introduce our next speaker. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sasha. I'm Julie Anderson. I am really excited to introduce our next speaker, David Turk, who is the Deputy Secretary at the Department of Energy. Welcome, Dave. Dave also has a background I'm sure many of our audience knows about, but prior to his current stint at DOE, he was Deputy Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, where he helped countries around the globe with their clean energy transitions. Prior to that, it sounds like he's had a whirlwind tour of the federal government, doing stints during the Obama-Biden administration at both DOE and in the White House. Prior to that, working on climate change and other issues at the Department of State. And we were just chatting about a long time ago working in the House and the Senate. So welcome, Dave. Before we jump into a couple of specific issues about what DOE is up to at this moment, I thought I would just offer you the opportunity to respond a little bit or expand on the nice overview we just heard from Senator Murkowski.
Well, thank you, Julie, and thanks to the Bipartisan Policy Center for not only this terrific discussion today and inviting me to join you all, but more generally for your incredible work, analytic work, and bringing together a variety of key folks to all work together on solutions for the future. And I couldn't be more pleased to be joining after Senator Lisa Murkowski, who you heard her, not only her eloquence, but you could tell her passion, her commitment to practical solutions, her commitment to solutions that work for all our country, as she said, rural and urban. So thanks to Senator Murkowski for all her terrific work in the Energy Act of 2020 and all the work she's currently doing, staying up till midnight, it sounds like, and beyond to try to get the incredibly important bipartisan infrastructure framework and bill enacted and into place. Let me start by just underlying where we're coming from on a climate change perspective, not just science driving us where we need to go and informing the goals that the president has laid out, President Biden has laid out, the very ambitious goals of net zero by 2050, clean electricity by 2035. But it's not just science. I think it's common sense and our own senses around us, seeing what's happening with droughts, with wildfires, with all sorts of challenges we're currently facing, let alone those we'll face into the future, even more exacerbated if we don't get our acts together domestically and internationally on the climate change front. There's challenges associated with doing this. We've got to fundamentally transform our energy economy in the span of a few decades' time. But there's also opportunity. There's a huge market and a huge economic opportunity. By one estimate, 23 trillion is by the end of this decade available. And President Biden has made it very clear, and Secretary Granholm has made it crystal clear. There's huge jobs, there's huge economic opportunities around our country and communities throughout this great country. But what's going to power that clean energy future? Well, it's wind turbines, it's EVs, it's a number of clean energy technologies, which is going to, as our opening speakers have certainly highlighted, going to increase the demand for these critical minerals. As Senator Murkowski said, the adjective critical is very critical here. There's a reason it's critical and not something else, and that we need those minerals, we need those rare earths already, and we're going to need even more, greater quantities into the future. One data point just to add to those that have been shared, the average electric vehicle by some estimates uses about 6 times the amount of critical minerals that an internal combustion engine. And just think about all those EVs that will be coming into the system and what that means for a variety of key critical minerals going forward. And as has been spoken, our economic competitors have been thinking about this for years, and more importantly, working on this for years, putting in place policies to help their own businesses corner some markets so far. Take China, for instance, the only country that controls every tier of the supply chain for critical minerals in our world right now, including lithium. They have 80% of raw material refining capacity. The US has virtually none right now. China has over 75% of global battery cell fabrication capacity. The US has less than 10% currently. That means right now our economy, our supply chains are vulnerable to disruptions, and our climate goals, achieving our climate goals, subject to disruption, and risk ceding the global clean energy race, all these phenomenal economic opportunities to China and to the rest of the world. That's why the president put out a very ambitious plan, a very ambitious program on critical minerals in February, very early in the administration, an executive order that directed several federal agencies, including our Department of Energy, to develop plans to secure critical domestic supply chains from resource extraction all the way to manufacturing. So what have we done? We've been partnering with the Departments of Commerce, Defense, State Department on a blueprint, looking at all parts of that supply chain. Each one of those key pieces in the supply chain offers up opportunities, economic opportunities for different parts of our country. We're investing in research and development for sustainable domestic extraction of these materials, whether in Alaska, Montana, West Virginia, variety of states and communities. We're supporting 13 projects right now in coal communities across the country to boost production. Our national labs are pioneering new ways to extract and refine materials sustainably, including getting these critical minerals from coal ash and refuse, acid mine drainage, cleaning up the environment while we're building our clean energy futures going forward. We're also investing a lot in batteries and solar panels that are more efficient and more recyclable. So we take a holistic picture of what we need to be, holistic plan of what we need to be doing going forward. But all of these actions, all of this blueprint, the executive action that kicked this all off, is really only a down payment on what we need to be doing going forward. And as Senator Murkowski laid out so eloquently, the discussions going on right now in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the framework, the discussions going on in the companion reconciliation piece of legislation. There's a whole range of tools, there's a whole range of resources that would allow us at the Department of Energy, working with our interagency partners, to do even more in this critical area, to get in the race, to win the race, to win these economic opportunities and shore up our clean energy supply chains of the future. So this is a hugely important few weeks up on Capitol Hill. Again, thanks to Senator Murkowski, other terrific senators stepping up and seizing this moment in time and moment in history. And we certainly look to continue doing that going forward. And I should say too, Julie, relying on the terrific analysis and the terrific discussions like today's from the Bipartisan Policy Center as well. So thanks again for having me here today, Julie, and looking forward to if you've got a few questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. So BPC is kind of based on this notion that collaboration and consensus can help us find practical solutions to challenging problems, such as what we're talking about here today. You've touched on, you and the senator both touched on sort of the need for collaboration up and down the supply chain, but we also need collaboration between governments. And I was wondering if you could explain a little bit how you are thinking about and what you're focused on to incentivize collaboration between the local, state, and federal governments. You talked a little bit about across the federal government, but what about the local, state, and federal collaboration needed to move us forward?
Well, thanks, Julie. And you're absolutely right. We need to work better across the federal government with the various departments that I mentioned, Commerce and the Defense Department, others who have critical roles here when it comes to supply chains. But we also have to work with state governments, local governments, the full range. Whether you call it collaborations or partnerships, we just need to put it on steroids. We need to do a whole lot more of that kind of partnership and collaboration. And we need to do it on all parts of the supply chain when it comes to critical minerals. We need to focus on the partnerships piece, working with each other to extract minerals and to do it sustainably in a way that works for communities from an economic and an environmental perspective. We need to work with state, local governments, entrepreneurs to process those minerals here and capture the economic benefits. And then we need to work with state and local communities on the manufacturing side of it as well. So those minerals going into EV batteries or wind turbines or the full range of those clean energy technologies that we need to have going forward. Just to focus on the manufacturing side, because it just happens to be manufacturing week at the Department of Energy. Just to give you a few examples of what we're trying to do, including and especially working in partnerships. So yesterday we announced $60 million for industrial assessment centers at universities that are going to provide free sustainability assessments to small and medium-sized manufacturers across the country. Tomorrow, we're announcing awards on low-carbon vehicle manufacturing. On Thursday, we'll have more announcements from our advanced manufacturing office. So we're trying each day, day in and day out, to work in those partnerships and frankly, to listen as well. Not all knowledge resides here in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of skills out there in communities across our country. And we in the federal government need to listen and make sure that we're an active listener and an active partner, just as you said, because collaboration is so important, Julie.
So sort of following on that theme, a sort of two-part follow-up question. One is we have an urgency around meeting our climate goals. We also have a need and a desire to engage with communities, as you just mentioned, across the country. How do we build cleaner and faster at the same time? Like, how do we square that circle, and how are you thinking about that these days?
Well, I think we have a rare, and maybe it's a historically rare opportunity in our country right now. As the president has so eloquently put it, as we come out of the COVID recession, we've got a chance to not just build back, but to build back better. And I think to do that, we've got to do exactly as you said, to focus in an urgent basis on building back and making sure that we've got jobs, making sure we've got economic opportunities for a full range communities around the country. Just as the senator said, it's not just urban communities, it's not just rural communities, it's tribal communities. It's a full range of communities that we have to be thinking about and focusing on in a way that I'm not sure we've ever done as fully or robustly or as urgently, just as you've said, Julie. But we also, with the climate imperative in mind, with the future market opportunities on clean energy that are before us, if we seize this moment and really step up to the plate, we can do it cleanly. So we can do it urgently, we can do it cleanly. We've got a lot of smart people, not only in the US government, our 17 national labs, we've got incredible leadership at the state level, at the local level, incredible entrepreneurs who are willing and ready to step up, but they need some funding, they need some support, they need some partnership. Just one example of one of the tools that we have currently in our tool belt, our loan program. Our loan program in all of 2020 only accepted, there were only 3 applications in the whole entirety of the year in 2020. We're looking to revamp and make sure our loan program is being as helpful a partner as it can be to communities, to the private sector, to the point where our new leader, Jigar Shah of the loan program, now has 3 applications not coming in for the entirety of 2021, but 3 applications coming in on average per week. So we're really trying to take the tools we have, sharpen those tools up, use them most effectively. And then, of course, we look forward to successful legislation coming out of the Senate, coming out of the House of Representatives to give us a full range of additional tools, a variety of additional demonstration programs that we can employ, whether on hydrogen, on CCUS. We can take advances on the transmission side of things, on the full range of R&D levers to get hydrogen really going at scale, long duration storage through our Earthshots program. So we're looking to take as many tools as Congress will give us and try to make the most of them, again, with partnership, in partnership with state, local communities, universities, entrepreneurs, investors.
David, thank you so much. If you have time for one more question, we have one coming in here that is asking for a bit more detail on if you were picking a part of the supply chain that DOE, you mentioned manufacturing quite a bit, so I might guess the answer, but if you had to pick which part of the supply chain that you are most keenly focused in on right now as you think about the loan program and all the other tools in your toolbox, which part of the supply chain would you emphasize?
So it's a bit of a cop-out maybe, but we really have to focus on all parts of the supply chain. I will say the Department of Energy has more muscle memory and more funding right now to really focus on the R&D side of things when it comes to each of those parts of the supply chain. We've got 17 national labs, as I've mentioned. We've got billions each year that we can really work on the R&D to bring down the costs of a variety of parts. But what we need to do is not just have the R&D levers, we need to have a variety of other levers, whether it's the loan program, whether it's the demonstration programs. If we receive the kinds of demonstration program funding that's being talked about in the bipartisan infrastructure framework and in the reconciliation piece of legislation as well, that ups our game significantly on using demonstration projects, working with communities. So it really is the full supply chain, and there's huge economic opportunities throughout the supply chain that we need to take full advantage of.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate all that you're doing, and it sounds like you have a lot on your plate. So thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. And again, thanks to the Bipartisan Policy Center for all that you do, Julie, and looking forward to hearing from the extraordinary panel that you have coming up as well.
Thank you. Well, now I am excited to welcome our panelists. Before I introduce them all, just a note to the audience that a reminder that you can submit live questions using the chat on YouTube or Facebook or on Twitter at #BPC Live. So with that, let me introduce our panel. We have Michael Matt, who is a senior strategist for EVs and energy policy at General Motors. He's worked in the electric propulsion space at the company for 10 years and has led the advanced planning effort for GM's next generation of battery electric vehicles. Welcome, Mike. Paramita Das, is General Manager for Global Marketing and Development at Rio Tinto. Prior to leading the team on marketing and development, she was Group Business Executive for Rio Tinto's CEO, as well as Chief Transformation Officer for the Atlantic Operations for Aluminum. And then rounding out our panel, we have Marcel Schoup, who is the Director of the Saline Lakes Program for the National Audubon Society, where she is focused on advancing balanced solutions to water use out west, not a small problem to take on. Marcel, prior to Audubon, she also worked at Rio Tinto working on sustainability and socially and environmentally responsible business practices. Thank you for all of you for joining us at the BPC today. Before we start, I was just going to kick it off with a question to each of you, but I wanted to share just a little personal story before we get going. So about a month ago, I woke up in my Maryland neighborhood to find that like half a dozen cars in the neighborhood had their catalytic converter stolen overnight. So that was my first real personal exposure to what is apparently this trend that's going on across the country. I don't know, it could be global, but it has made it much more personal for me in terms of talking about critical minerals. So again, thank you all for being with us today. Mike, I thought we might start with you. You're a senior strategist working on electric vehicles at GM. Seems like you also must be incredibly busy these days. I see GM is inking deals to produce lithium, to produce batteries, and I think still make cars, all in the United States. So I thought maybe we could start with you giving us a little bit of a flavor of why GM is investing in the whole supply chain to meet your electrification commitments.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Julie. So as everyone probably knows, we've announced that we are committed to an all-electric future. GM is trying to we know electric vehicles are the future. We're trying to make that transition happen more rapidly to try and decarbonize the transportation sector. So we've announced $35 billion in investment over the next 5 years in electric and autonomous vehicles. We'll be launching 30 electric vehicles worldwide in the next 5 years. We're transforming every part of our business, from the sales of electric vehicles to the manufacturing of those vehicles, to frankly the supply chain. The supply chain for batteries, as noted by Senator Murkowski and Deputy Turk, is largely based in Asia. So we've made a commitment to electric vehicles. We've also made a commitment to battery cell manufacturing in the U.S. We've announced 2 plants so far that'll produce about 30 or 35 gigawatt hours of cells each. Those will be in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and also Lordstown, Ohio. We've announced 2 other plants that we're going to build in the U.S. as well. It's hard to keep up with our announcements of our transformation. But we know, and as your previous speakers indicated, just because we're making those cells in the U.S., we also have to look at securing domestic supplies of the materials that go into those plants. So we have to kind of walk up the supply chain to the cathodes and the anodes, and even walking further to the lithium, the nickel, the cobalt sulfates, and then again, even further into the extraction and mining where we can, frankly, where those resources exist in the US. So that midstream is actually really critical, because we feel that's something that can happen in a fairly rapid time frame, and by rapid, I'm 5-year time frame. But getting that, securing that supply, getting that supply of domestic, making sure it's sustainable, sustainably processed, making sure it's cost competitive, is really a critical factor in securing the supply of the battery cells we need to realize that EV future, and getting batteries down to a cost where they're competitive with internal combustion engine vehicles. So we're fully committed, we're fully supportive of all the efforts of the administration to build those supply chains, working in sometimes with trusted allies and partners as well as having a robust recycling program to supplement in the future that domestic supply chain that gets developed.
Thank you, Mike. Marcel, we touched on in the intro your you and Audubon working on trying to balance climate goals with more near-term environmental impacts like water use. My question to you is, how is the organization currently thinking about the need for critical minerals to meet our decarbonization goals?
Thanks, Julie, and thanks to the Bipartisan Policy Center for asking Audubon to join you. I think that I'm sure many of your members or audience recognize that Audubon's has been focused for years on protecting birds in the places they need. And in order to do that, we're going to have to address this urgent need to do something about climate change, or otherwise we're going to not be able to avoid catastrophic impacts to birds as well as other wildlife and people. And in 2019, Audubon issued a report where it found that nearly 2/3 of the North American bird species would be vulnerable to extinction if we could not, under the current temperature rise that we're seeing now. And so Audubon has taken a very strong approach to recognizing we've got to get to these zero net emissions by 2050. And to do so is going to take a range of solutions. Those include renewable energy technologies like solar and wind and battery storage. And obviously, for the reasons that all the speakers have spoken about so far, those rely heavily on minerals, and particularly critical minerals. And so as we look at how do we achieve those climate goals and address the needs along the supply chain, we want to be there to support responsibly, socially and environmentally produced products, and support the approach to a well thought out plan for where these types of facilities can and should be sited, avoid environmental impacts, but still provide very important social benefits.
Thank you. Paramita, Rio Tinto is obviously a huge global company, but I did note that you are recently talking about investing resources to recover critical minerals from mining byproducts here in the United States. I was hoping you could expand a little bit on some of the factors that were driving the company to make those investments.
It's really great to be here. Thanks for having me. And I have to say I'm humbled by the conversation that has happened thus far. Really exciting and really great to see the energy and excitement around this critical topic. So as Rio Tinto, we are the world's second largest metal and mining company. We are in many countries, but we've been in the US for a very long time with our roots in our copper mine in Kennecott, Utah, and our investments at Resolution in Arizona, which is close to $8 billion. So those have been in process. We've been in California with our boron plant. But what is critical for us is sustainability has been at the heart of our climate strategy and our group strategy for a very long time, over a decade. This time round, we actually even went one step ahead. We said we are going to put $1 billion aside for all projects which are climate related. And every project will be looked at with the climate lens on. Just to give you an example about the critical minerals sector, very recently, I think you all saw that we got tellurium from our Kennecott mine as a byproduct. Thanks to that, we also got a grant from the DoD for rhenium production. At our boron plant, we are actually extracting lithium from waste piles. And we also have a partnership with the DOE on Critical Minerals Institute. All of this aside, we are also now working on recovering critical minerals from e-waste. So for us, if you think about Rio Tinto, the first thing that probably comes to mind is going to the virgin land and extracting minerals from that. But we are looking at extracting minerals and materials important for the future for human progress from the waste products as well. Clear success, so not in the US, outside of the US, we have also extracted scandium from waste, which is now being used for aluminum scandium and used in aerospace for lightweighting and so on. So for us, ESG, mining and critical materials, rare earth, all of that is synonymous with the future because we see all of this working together. And some of the previous speakers also spoke about partnership and the ecosystem. We fundamentally believe that sustainability is a team sport. None of us can solve for it by ourselves. So we have to work together because each of us have a role to play. We just need to come together in this ecosystem to make this happen. Lastly, Julie, I'll end by saying how we are looking at this strategy. So in terms of investment, in terms of our current mining structure, the future, whether it's in through our waste or even urban mining, through circular economy, and we have invested in recycling as well. But one of the critical things that we are bringing to the table is complete transparency for the supply chain. And I think that's critical in today's world. So in February of this year, we launched a product called START. START stands for Sustainability, Traceability, Assurance from Rio Tinto. It's essentially the nutrition label of our products, of our materials on a blockchain technology. As the Senator said, COVID brought a recognition that digital is the future. We are using digital to at least get the data and the provenance through the supply chain to our end users, like Michael and like you and I, as we buy our cars and our cans. We believe that the ESG credentials and the provenance of where the material originated and how it was extracted, mined, processed, and transformed have to go with the product such that everybody, including our government, our customs borders, and our different government agencies like DOD and DOE get to see what material is coming in, where is it coming from, and how sustainable is the material source. So it's all a holistic view for us, Julie, and we fundamentally believe that this is the first time where everybody is aligned towards a single goal, which is fantastic. This is a great place to be.
Well, that is fascinating. The idea that you could trace the mineral, right, all the way from the cradle to the grave. So and all the places along the way is truly beyond my personal ability to comprehend how we would do that, but that's fantastic. So we heard both Deputy Secretary Turk and Senator Murkowski talk about their goals for like the federal government, and we've all talked about partnerships and collaborations. I wanted to ask each of the three of you to maybe elaborate a little bit on if you had a magic wand or you have a priority list, and what's on the top of it. What would you like to see either the administration do next with any current authorities they have, and or as Congress seems to be functioning fairly well these days, what you would like to see come out of Congress in the way of new authorities?
You want one of us to go first, Julie?
Yeah, anybody sorry. I guess I should have picked one of you, but anybody want to chime in, like where you would like to see a little, any more emphasis placed by the federal government in helping you work on what you're doing right now?
Maybe I'll start, Julie, just because I was waiting to see who starts first. And I'll keep it short and hand over to my colleagues on the panel. Look, from the government's help, I think the infrastructure bill would be fantastic because that's the future. I think we need to get moving on that. Whatever the outcome is, we would like to know so that we can keep the wheels turning. The other part would be just making sure that the public-private partnership is actually accentuated. How do we bring this partnership to light? How do we make sure we are able to answer some of the questions because we are at the extractive and resource-intensive side of the world, we are sometimes very far away from understanding what, for example, Michael would need. And it would be really great to actually bring all of us together, thanks to the work of the government, such that we can create solutions faster and a more holistic manner.
I was just going to mention, I think it's really great, the recognition of the midstream processing and refining, because frankly, if you do mining and extraction, it doesn't matter what happens there, you're still shipping it somewhere else. Or even if you do recycling, getting that midstream refining and processing, it's also maybe a shorter term, kind of a more near-term benefit. We think that's critical. So we're very supportive of what's in the infrastructure bill, some of the proposed amendments. We think the ATVM can be a really effective program, you know, to have some low-interest loans to some of these technologies. And I think the other thing I would mention is using American innovation to green some of these processes. Frankly, some of these processes, the reason they're not in the US right now is they're not necessarily that environmentally friendly. So we have to find a way, and maybe, you know, I think our research, when you think about EV research, I think everybody thinks about the battery chemistries and things like that. But we'd love some more research on greener cathode manufacturing, for example. You know, greener lithium extraction, things like this. I think it's really important to not just, we have to focus kind of across the supply chain, but those midstream, greening those midstream processes, I think is actually really critical to experiencing some near-term benefits. Longer term, obviously the mining and extraction processes need to be there too, but again, that's kind of a longer term issue. I see you nodding your head, Parmita.
I agree.
Marcel, you want to add anything?
Sure, thank you. First of all, I agree that the incentives that are focused on increasing R&D to actually improve some of these technologies to make them less environmentally impactful is really, really important. And I think from a partnership and cooperation point of view, you know, I think Senator Murkowski mentioned that the government is interested in mapping, first of all, where some of these critical minerals lie. And I think the administration says even just looking at the whole supply chain generally and where the opportunities are to site those facilities, it would be really great to have a collaborative process and a cooperative process, you know, across the governments, like you mentioned, Julie, at all levels, but also with other stakeholders to really identify what are the sensitive environments or sensitive ecosystems in these areas that we may want to try to avoid. What are those cultural resources we also want to protect? And are there ways to sort of look at the holistic landscape integrated assessment and planning as a whole and really think about where do these pieces go, and do we need a lithium extraction everywhere, or should we focus our resources in areas where the processes can be the least environmentally impactful, for example? And so that's one area that we hope the government's already headed in, but it's not clear how broad that assessment and planning will be.
BPC has a cleverly called Cleaner, Faster, Smarter Task Force looking at permitting reform, but I think the title works well for not only permitting reform, but how all of these processes can work together. And I would love to hear from each of you a bit more on that. Can we use task forces that bring together, Marcel, as you said, the interest from around the local community, as well as the business folks who have the know-how about how to do things in a more innovative way? Can we, I feel like there's a desire to do that across the spectrum now. Welcome your all's thoughts on how we actually speed ourselves up to make that happen in a more real-time way.
I think maybe one.
Anybody want to chime in?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, you know, when you said that, I think a good example, at least as far as I know, is something called the Lithium Valley Commission out in California that's trying to bring in all stakeholders in the Salton Sea area where there's geothermal energy, also lithium brine resources that could potentially be extracted, and they've involved the local community, and it's it's efforts like that. I point to that as just an example. I think in saying that it is possible to do things like this and to try and get a win-win-win, green energy, jobs for the community, lower the environmental impact, and domestic production.
Add to that, Julie, all I'll say is not only possible, but also needed. I think it's mission critical now for all of us. And here's the reason why is we all are sitting on a certain core expertise. This collaboration will help bring those core expertise to the table, but also it will actually need a catalytic boost to the technology and the R&D side, for example. We need to do things differently, take the world in a different manner. I'll give you an example. At Rio, for one of the products, not critical mineral, but aluminium, one of the base products. Since the day aluminium was birthed, people have been working on how to make aluminium carbon free. So that was just around 130 plus years. And thank God I'm sitting on this end of the spectrum and not the other end, because now we do have a product called zero carbon aluminium through a technology called ELYSIS. And now we have produced the first zero carbon metal, which is being used by Apple for its MacBook Pro and is being used as a pilot for Michelob Ultra cans. So things are possible, but technology can't take 130 plus years to drive the innovation that we need today. And to fast track the innovation, we really need to come together and make it possible. The last part I'll say is things like urban mining and things like circular economy actually provide a potential for us to create these supply sources even faster. And we need to kind of bring ourselves together and say, how do we make it possible? For example, like it was mentioned that the wind turbines and actually the EV batteries could be the source for future permanent magnets that can go back into the supply chain. How do we make that supply chain possible for the future resources? Because this is a long-term play. We have to fix for today, but we also have to look for the future, because this question is going to be for us for a very long time. Marcel, over to you.
Thank you. Some really interesting ideas, and I think talking about the faster approaches again, ensuring that there are resources to bring these collaborative processes together, stakeholders together to meet with business and governments, and thinking through what makes sense is going to be really important. And that is also important in the permitting area, ensuring that if we're going to permit some of these activities, the agencies need to have the right resources to do that. But hopefully we can find a way that even before the permitting stage, there's lots of thought given to how and where and what the important values are that we want to try to protect in all that process. That can avoid conflict and actually move processes along often.
Right, save us time in the long run. Well, we are, speaking of time, about out of time. I want to thank all three of you very much for participating in this program today. This is a tough, sticky issue, and you all are coming from it from very diverse perspectives, which is what we love to do here at the Bipartisan Policy Center. And we look forward to continuing to work with you on this and hope that we can elevate and try to help find solutions for some of the thornier topics that we've touched on today. And just another thank you for everyone who tuned in today, and a thanks to Senator Murkowski and Deputy Secretary Turk. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.